talk about sustainability. So once again, not in a very technical or scientific fashion, but what actually it means in simpler terms. So sustainability is maintaining a process or thing over a long period of time. And what I really want to get to is, how do I ensure sustainability in the things that I get involved in my personal life? So I think in particular I want to talk about how I look at financial freedom, but in the context of it being sustainable, or whatever I call financial freedom, in the simplest of forms. How then do I ensure that is sustainable? So if I'm able to afford a particular lifestyle now, how do I ensure that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that particular lifestyle I can sustain or even be better? So there are three things that I constantly look at, three questions that I constantly ask myself, or three principles that I really constantly look at. So the first one is about pushing boundaries. Now, someone says you can't save yourself to being successful or to being wealthy. In other words, you just can't be putting money somewhere and hope that by you putting this together, you're going to be successful, you're going to be wealthy. So in that regard, I always try and push the boundaries. In other words, if I feel that my current position only affords me a $1,000 kind of thing, I always then ask myself, how do I aim for achieving $1,200 thing? Yes, I've got $1,000 now, but how do I ensure that I can push for $1,200? So the first principle is about pushing the boundary, looking beyond my present means or my present or current situation. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I always try and look at is hedging. Now, just for the fact that I'm always pushing boundaries, that in itself brings risk, and you just want to make sure that you've got ways of managing the risk that you have. So whether you work for a bank or you work for another company, risk is a big thing, and you need to be able to identify all possible risks and come up with mitigative actions before the risk actually transpires. So in my case, that's what I'll call hedging. Hedging is just in case my pushing for boundaries goes sour, what do I have in place so that I can continue, living normally? Yes, I could have an allergic reaction or a cough or a hiccup there in terms of my financial freedom, but the basic thing must always be there. So how then do I do hedging? Simplest thing that I do is I always try and ensure that every month I put away monies, right? So this money, I don't have to think about it. It's money that I have decided. So if you have watched the other episodes in terms of how do you manage your finances, one of the key things that I spoke about there was you need to ensure that at least 10% of what you earn goes towards some money that ensures that you're always liquid, right? But in my case, that money, I put it in a place that I can't access, right? So you also don't want to put it next to your bed, because you can always go back to it, but you want to put it in a place where for you to be able to access that, you probably need to write to the bank, give them 2 months notice, 3 months notice, and what that will do for you is it will ensure that you really think about collecting this money before you go there. Because now imagine you have to write the bank, and then the bank will say, okay, give us 3 months notice. The assumption is that within that 3 months you'd have come back to your senses and you say, probably I don't need this. I look at hedging from two perspectives. The first part is putting money aside for a rainy day, right? If things don't work well, how do I maintain the same lifestyle that I'm living? Or maybe just slightly decline, but it must not be catastrophic, where we've heard of things where people say, no, so and so used to have these kind of things, but all of a sudden one small thing went sour, and then everything totally, now you must be pulling kids out of school, you must be living where you're staying, you must be, those kind of catastrophic things. Yes, I understand that at some point, when things don't work well, you might need to adjust your life here and there, but I'm saying it must just not be catastrophic. So what do? I put that money aside, which is what I call hedging. So that's the first thing, money for a rainy day. But also it is money that I use to diversify, which is the second component under hedging. First component is to ensure that I'm okay when there's a rainy day. Second component under hedging is for diversification. Now, if I'm investing in houses, I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket. Even, biblically, it talks about investing in multiple things. It says plant there and plant there, because you don't know which one is going to be fruitful. So I use the same principle. I diversify. In other words, if I'm investing in property, I want to invest, for example, in my case, in an ice business, because the assumption is if one day property doesn't work, but at least I still have ice business, so that it carries me through. So those are the two things that I really look at when I look at hedging. Then the final thing that I'm always looking at is for growth. So growth, I'm talking about the current existing businesses. I'm not talking about diversifying or going into something else. I'm talking about, in my case again, the housing portfolio or the property portfolio that I have. How do I ensure growth, and how do I scale it, right? Or the ice business, how do I ensure growth and scalability? So that is the third thing. You always have to look at how do you grow whatever you have now. Okay, so just to recap, 3 things that I always wire. So firstly, I look at pushing the boundaries. If I only have $1,000 now, how do I push that and stretch it to afford $1,200 worth of things for me? That's number one. The second thing is hedging. Hedging is ensuring that I manage my risks. And how do I do that? Firstly, I put money aside for a rainy day, and I call that hedging. The second thing under hedging, I ensure that I diversify. I don't put all my eggs in one basket. So I don't have one business. I have to try that and that. And finally, I have to ensure that with whatever businesses that I have, I constantly think about growth. How do I scale them? How do I make them bigger? That for me is what then can bring sustainability in one's life. Thank you.